Welcome to this video. This is 5 of 7 in this series. And we're going to talk about the 3 biggest roadblocks that I experienced. I'm 51 to get into that physique and maintain it, kind of easily. So one of them was insulin resistance. The next one was not eating to my genetics and a lack of choline. The other videos, it kind of touched on that, but I'm going to go into more detail here. And, I'm not the expert. I'm just a dude that's just hungry to kick ass in life. So I reach out to experts that know a lot more about this than me, and I want to share it with you. So we'll talk about how muscle goes on, using things like mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin, how much protein coming from the experts, how to increase thyroid hormone and why you'd want to do that, and a sample of what I eat. So basically there's 5 steps to putting testosterone into the muscle cell, pulling in amino acids, triggering mTOR to put on muscle. And we're also going to have a look at what the experts say, like Dr. James Di there. And before we get to that place, the first thing we have to understand, as I've continually talked about in this series, is old insulin resistance here, which is associated with a decrease in testosterone secretion in men. And it's estimated that about 80% of people have got it, they don't even know. So that could be you. And, basically, how do you fucking know you've got insulin resistance? Is it difficult to put on muscle and stay lean? Is your energy up and down? And do you have this shit here? Increased hunger, heightened perceived pleasantness of sweet taste, and increased food intake. So as you can see, it's a big problem. You're just going to struggle and you don't have to. So what I'm trying to do here is to put it all together for you so you can see how you might potentially finally, get to a place you've got consistent energy and optimal testosterone. As I spoke about in the previous video, these chemicals, it's all linked below, so check that out, can produce insulin resistance in and of itself. Now, as I've got outlined here, protein is a pretty touchy subject, and if you've got liver problems or kidney problems, then high protein ain't going to work for you until you get that fixed. So what can actually screw up your liver and your kidney? Well, let's just examine that. So one of the things, as I spoke about in this video series, these chemicals, hang on a second, these chemicals, they promote kidney damage, right? So, and they're kind of everywhere. They've even found these chemicals in polar bears. So, we've just polluted this planet. Another thing that will cause kidney problems is insulin resistance. So as you can see here, the metabolic syndrome, chronic kidney disease, insulin resistance plays a critical role in metabolic syndrome and is associated with chronic kidney disease. And what about the liver, you might be thinking? Well, there it is again, insulin resistance. So just to show you about genetics and how you can, not one size fits all. This is my hope that you'll pick up on. We're not all equal. We have to do things differently. As you can see here, I'm carbohydrate intolerant. And you might be thinking, well, I'm keto, all that shit. No, I have carbohydrates every single day. I just have the appropriate amount for me. Carbs aren't the enemy here. Too much is the enemy. And saturated fat, I do worse with saturated fat. I've also got poor vitamin B absorption. So, we're all different here. And choline. Now, this is absolutely key. As we progress, I'll unpack why choline is key, especially for testosterone production and a fast, sharp brain. As you can see here, this is a genetic report by Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Saturated fats here, negative effects on blood glucose and insulin levels. So, if you go keto and have lots of saturated fat, keto is pretty good, but not so great for me. And with saturated fat, I've got a 2.76-fold increase for obesity. And clearly, I'm not obese anymore. But what I struggled with for a long time is this. I was insulin resistant here, and I had no clue. And I was struggling. My energy was up and down. I just couldn't get lean. And it wasn't until I started unpacking this and working with experts in this space that I finally got to this physique here. And I don't count calories. And the video that explained that is the one before this. So that's video number 4 in this series. Now, again, we'll just unpack choline a little bit here. So as you can see, I've got pretty poor choline status. So it's going to screw up your memory and also cause fatty liver disease. And the way it does that is phosphatidylcholine. So choline turns into phosphatidylcholine here. So phosphatidylcholine is a very important lipoprotein to make VLDL that exports fat out of the liver. So if you don't have enough choline, you can get a fatty liver, and that's going to give you insulin resistance if you don't get enough choline. And because I do really poorly with choline, you can see it's a pretty big problem for me. And I'll walk you through the symptoms of a choline deficient diet towards the end here. But we now know that it's going to cause insulin resistance, fatty liver, but all of those other problems there. Now, choline is also a neurotransmitter. And coming from this book here, and it's linked below if you want to grab that on Amazon, Why My Brain Isn't Working, ACH, which is acetylcholine, is a neurotransmitter necessary for focus, concentration, memory, brain endurance, muscle contraction in the gym, nitric oxide production, which is critical for testosterone production, and also good blood pressure. All right, and this is how nitric oxide and choline play together to boost testosterone. Well, it doesn't really boost testosterone. It just gets you to a place where you can start making it again. This pathway here, number 3, is a nitric oxide pathway. So if you've got a low choline diet and you are like me genetically, you need more choline in your diet, right there you're going to have suboptimal testosterone. And another thing about choline, coming from this book here, this one was written by Nathan S. Bryant, PhD, Functional Nitric Oxide Nutrition. So you can even get a boost in nitric oxide through nutrition. But check this out. As he's got here, this single molecule can prevent high blood pressure, combat disease that damages your heart, brain, kidneys, keeps your arteries young and flexible, prevent, slow, or reverse the buildup of artery clogging plaques. So this shit here, right? So you can get rid of that. And nitric oxide, as he's got here, expands and relaxes the arteries. So, you've got great blood pressure, kills bacteria and cancer cells, and helps your brain communicate, right? So pretty key. And because I want to give you as much information as I can, and to boost your testosterone, that's what this video series is all about. And I'll unpack this on the final video here, but we've got another hormone that really screws us up. So if you're having low calories, it's been shown in a lot of research now that sex hormone binding globulin will go up, and you'll have significant decreases in total testosterone here. So we'll unpack that as we progress. But when you've got excessively high sex hormone binding globulin, and I did for a couple of years there, high levels of sex hormone binding globulin are associated with infertility, decreased sex drive, erectile dysfunction. All right, so we'll unpack that somewhere in video number 7 in this series. Another thing that I want to touch on again, and this comes when you're not eating enough calories. Over here, elite bodybuilders, significant decreases in total testosterone. So what we want to do, and I'll unpack this one in video 7 here, is have a healthy adaptation to training in the gym instead of this decline here with your testosterone and fatigue. But as you can see here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that basically pull down testosterone and keep it clamped down. Video 7 will unpack that. And as I've mentioned, A choline deficient diet will lower your testosterone. Training too hard and you're under eating will lower testosterone. So a lot of people, try and boost their testosterone with fancy supplements. They're just wasting their money until you can get to a place where you're eating at least at maintenance or a little bit above that. Your testosterone for a lot of men, not always, will just be suboptimal and you're going to struggle. So why would you struggle? Well, as this research paper here says, and these 4 points from that research paper, which is right there. So testosterone, when it's at optimal levels, significantly slows fat accumulation. That's pretty good. It improves insulin resistance, has a primary anti-inflammatory effect, and significantly reduces fat mass. So it's putting a lot of energy into the system. So if you're, training too hard, you've got those chemicals, everything that I've just mentioned before this, it's going to be tough to get that body that you want. And another big problem that a lot of men have got, and I learned this from Huberman, you can check out what this is all about on his podcast here, Ice Bath and Cold Benefits. So basically, in a nutshell, you've got two kinds of stress, and I think of them as positive stress, growth, recovering, healing, and negative stress, where you're wasting muscle and you feel like shit, basically. The 7th video, I'll show you that we've got a signature of quitting and also a signature of effort and winning. But as Huberman said in that podcast, number 1 here, de-stress, basically you've got cortisol a bit too high, elevated. But when you get it right, cortisol in the butter zone here, so this is the blood levels, it's in stimulation zone. So you will stimulate testosterone production in the gym, but you can also do this with your mind. But when cortisol goes a bit too high, 2 big problems. The first one is that it inhibits testosterone production. What it does, I'll unpack that one in a moment, but in a nutshell, all your androgens, so your androgens here, we're talking about DHEA, testosterone, and dihydrotestosterone. So they're going to be wasted. It goes through an enzyme here called aromatase and converts it into estrogen, so not great. And everything that I've identified coming from my mentors, but also a bit of research myself, oxidative stress and inflammation are a bit too high, you're going to waste it. If your estrogen receptors are wrongly activated by chemicals and other things, you're going to waste it. Again, cortisol's too high, it aromatizes your androgens, turns them into estrogen. And this one here, I've only just recently learned about a high-fat meal, right? And this was on a podcast with Huberman and Dr. Kyle Giblett here. And he said, as you can see, I've got highlighted here, high-fat meals also upregulate aromatase. And for me, genetically, it kind of makes sense. When I was on keto, because my testosterone was never high optimal. Could never get it there. And my genetics really shone the torch on that, because a high-fat diet, I don't do too well on. So we're all different. So if you can just, take that home and just realize that not one size fits all, and that you can get to a place where you can, be optimized. I'm 51 and I got to this place. And if you've watched the other videos in this series, you'll see that, I've had a bit of a rocky journey to this place, but you can get there. I'm no one special. You can do this. The difference, what I've kind of identified between that positive stress and negative stress. So when you're in positive stress, you can produce testosterone, but you've got trophic support for the brain. And I spoke about that in the previous video. But look at the way your brain works. So your heart rhythms are nice and uniform. You've got increased cortical activity and, nice amygdala activity. But over here, when you're activated, and we're talking, your heart rate's elevated here when you're doing a presentation or you're at the gym, your blood pressure's up, you've got vasoconstriction, and your brain just doesn't work properly. It's like, oh, fuck, this sucks, man. I don't want to do this. So literally the blood drains from the cortex and it goes to the amygdala here. And you also have heart arrhythmias, as you can see here. So this comes from the Heart Math Institute. So what we've really got to take home is that, it is kind of complex. And that's why I put together this series of videos from what I've learned from experts, but also unpacking the research, because I'm just hungry for life and I want to figure this out. One of the biggest issues when you've got insulin resistance is that you lose out on growth hormone. So why is that important? Well, two reasons. The first one here is that in humans here, when glucose is a bit high, it inhibits growth hormone release. And the same is true for insulin, elevated insulin here. So it reduces growth hormone. Now, Matthew Walker here, he's a neuroscientist and he researches sleep. And as he's got in that book here, Why We Sleep, without growth hormone here, growth hormone replenishing the lining of your blood vessels called the endothelium here, and this endothelium incidentally releases nitric oxide, they will be slowly shorn and stripped of their integrity. So what's the result? Well, your blood vessels rupture, heart attack and stroke are very common. So that's another reason why you want to make sure that you don't have insulin resistance and you've got optimal blood glucose. And the next reason that you want growth hormone in the up position, it rejuvenates and repairs the body. So we're talking about the brain, the heart, the blood vessels, as we just mentioned there, the endothelium, the ovaries if you're a chick, and the testicles if you're a man, the intestines, the kidneys, the smooth muscle, including the smooth muscle of the penis, the liver. So it does a lot of heavy lifting. If you've got insulin resistance or elevated blood glucose, as Shubman says in this video here, in his podcast, Improving Metabolism, it flatlines and inhibits growth hormone release. How do you know if you've got insulin resistance? Well, you want to get your blood work done. And a way that you can do it, and I learned this from Dr. Ken Berry, get your hemoglobin A1C checked. And if it's in this yellow zone there and higher, well, yeah, you've got insulin resistance. You need to get that fixed. When you've got elevated insulin, just before we move on, it activates several inflammatory signaling pathways. And I spoke about that in the previous video. And as I learned from my mentor, Dr. Anthony J., who did a PhD in hormones and cholesterol, and he also is a genetic expert, this is what he said that happens to us when we've got too much inflammation.
I mean, the problem with inflammation is it shuts off muscle growth. It basically tells your body you're in a stress state, so it's not a building state.
All right, so you're not in the growth, recovery, and healing, and you're over here in negative stress, so you struggle. So that's the bottom line. You got terrible blood pressure. You can feel anxious and just feel like garbage. As I mentioned in the previous video, we've got to get blood glucose under control. And it doesn't mean that you can't have carbohydrates. You just have to eat the appropriate amounts for you genetically. And there's an easy way to figure that out. And I spoke about that on the previous video. So before we go on and talk about how much protein, I just want to play this video again and just, make sure that you work with a medical professional before you change anything in your diet. You got to be smart about this. You could have kidney dysfunction or liver dysfunction. You could have something underlying there that will backfire on you. So this little video that I'm going to play is from my friend, Dr. Ken Berry.
Absolutely. It's often too late by the time you've become financially comfortable.
Yeah.
Very often you've done so much damage to every tiny artery in your body that you're now stuck with permanent erectile dysfunction or permanent forgetfulness or permanent insomnia, permanent shortness of breath, chest pain, right? Gut issues. You've done so much damage. Some of it can't be taken back. And that's why I'm so active on social media, constantly reaching out and trying to help people, because once it's too late, you might regain a little bit of that function, but it's never going to be like it once was, and it's never going to be like it could have been. And that's very sad if you think about it, that somebody's basically handicapped for the rest of their life, physically or mentally or emotionally, because of bad dietary decisions that they made for the first few decades of their life that they didn't realize were bad decisions because they had never been trained properly.
Exactly. All right. So make sure that you consult with your healthcare provider before you take any action on anything. So how much protein? Well, coming from the experts here, Dr. Gabrielle Line, you can check out her podcast here on the YouTubes, but 2 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. And this legend here, Dr. James Nicol Antonio, as he's got here in his book Win, and I've got that linked in the description below, there's no evidence that high protein intake is dangerous for the kidneys in healthy people. But if you've got kidney damage, that's a whole new ball game. So you got to really make sure that you've got good health before you try and leverage high protein diet or change anything in your diet. I just want to emphasize that. But as you've seen with my genetics, not one size fits all. And that's the big take home that I want, you to understand. I don't do well with saturated fats. I don't do well with a high fat diet. So I get healthy amounts of fat into my body and I make sure I eat the right fats for me. And that's why I thrive. So as we mentioned, if you train too hard in the gym, testosterone is going to come down. If you don't eat enough, testosterone is going to be down for most men. So the question becomes, how much protein? Well, coming from this research paper here, I'll just bring that back there. So when you're at energy maintenance or above, they're saying that 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram or 2.2. So that's where you want to get it. But if you're in energy restriction, remember that more than likely your testosterone will come down there. So if you do want to go below maintenance and rip off the body fat, these experts from this research paper say 2.3 to 3.1 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. The only enemy that you've got are these chemicals because they cause kidney damage. But all of this shit, testicular dysgenesis, obesity, asthma, allergies, breast cancer, it's pretty fucking nasty. And insulin resistance can drive chronic kidney disease, and insulin resistance can also drive chronic liver disease. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, choline, if you've got a low choline diet, and when I put my DNA through Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I was shocked to find out that I needed more choline than the average person. So at school, I didn't do too well. I had poor comprehension. It was more than likely because I didn't have enough choline in my diet and fatty liver disease. So the reason why you get fatty liver disease is because to export fat out of the liver, you need VLDL. So these are lipoproteins. They're like a little boat that takes fat out of the liver. And if you don't have enough choline, you won't make phosphatidylcholine. So choline is made into phosphatidylcholine, which makes these VLDL lipoprotein boats that export fat out of the liver so you can use it. So coming from that book, then I've got it linked in the description below. You could have all of these symptoms of a choline deficient diet. So if you want to pause that and just have a look at those, so that could be you there. Now let's talk about how we put on muscle. So when I was getting schooled on this and learning how to put on muscle, what triggers muscle protein synthesis are these 4 steps down here, and I'll unpack that shortly. But there's this pathway called mTOR that you see here. It's called mechanistic target of rapamycin. So it's what stimulates muscle protein synthesis. So what you need to activate that is healthy levels of cortisol, because if cortisol is up too high, glucocorticoids, they basically inhibit mTOR here. So no muscle protein synthesis, but they waste muscle. And to add insult to injury, remember I mentioned earlier, it takes all your androgens, DHEA, testosterone, dihydrate testosterone, goes through an enzyme called aromatase and turns it into estrogen. You feel like shit. So we've got to make sure that we've got all of these things true. So if you train in the gym to increase testosterone, you train, smart, not hard. You have the right amount of amino acids here. Number 2, you've got optimal levels of testosterone, namely free testosterone. You've got healthy leptin, cortisol, and insulin. You will put on the muscle over time. It's not going to happen fast and magically, but it will happen. If you're training correctly in the gym, pushing up testosterone, you're eating the right amount of protein, your free testosterone is up, you've got healthy leptin, cortisol, and insulin signaling, you will put on the muscle. So let's just unpack that, how that actually happens in the muscle cell. Basically, free testosterone comes into the muscle cell here, number 1, hits what's called a transcription factor, normally an androgen receptor. Then that promotes a pathway into the nucleus of the DNA, hits specific muscle building genes, and it comes out as mRNA proteins, And that's what builds your muscle. So if you've got low testosterone, you're not going to be building a lot of muscle. But if you're not eating enough protein to stimulate this mTOR pathway here, again, you're not going to be building a lot of muscle. And just because I want to give you as much value as I can here, androgen receptors, as you can now see, are pretty important. And this research paper here, I looked at and I was just kind of shocked because quercetin here, which I used to take, you've got the AR receptor here, androgen receptor, protein expression is inhibited by quercetin in a dose-dependent manner. And these chemicals also do the same thing. So it's a mess out there. If you supplement haphazardly, you could be doing yourself a disservice. Basically, everything that I put in and on my body goes through what I call the androgen pathway test. And I used to enjoy stevia. It's touted as pretty safe, right? Well, there's research now that, I'll come to this one in a moment, that says, maybe testosterone levels are going to be lowered when you're taking stevia. Unfortunately for me, dairy has got a lot of estrogenic compounds in it, including yogurt. So basically, I'm going to go over that in a moment on a clean screen and show you exactly my food staples, my basic supplements, and it's all based on my genetic report, okay? So one thing that I want to touch on here is the thyroid. Now, the thyroid hormone is absolutely key to getting lean and muscular, increasing your metabolism, having a lot of energy, but it also boosts testosterone production. And I unpacked that on the previous video, but I'll go into more detail on video number 7. As you can see here, the thyroid hormone needs a lot of vitamins and minerals. You need iron, iodine, tyrosine, zinc, selenium, vitamin E, and all the B vitamins here. And as you saw on my genetic report, I don't do too well with B vitamins. I need more than the average person. And what takes out the thyroid hormone here, as you can see, medications, liver, kidney dysfunction, infections, toxins. You've also got inflammation and a low-calorie diet and stress. Over here, you've got autoimmune diseases. You've got toxins and pesticides, fluoride, medications, and stress again. So if you don't have your thyroid hormone working, you'll have lower testosterone levels again. And you might be thinking, why is that the case? I will unpack that right now. So the thyroid hormone is pretty key. So when it's not optimized, and this is pretty, you won't like this, but here it is, causes testicular abnormalities. So pretty key. Now, there's a couple of important things that thyroid hormone, namely T3 over here does. It increases the Dig cell LH receptors. I'll explain what that means very shortly. And also mRNA levels of steroidogenic enzymes in the pathway. So let's just unpack that. So this is basically how testosterone is produced. So there's 6 things that have to happen. And the mitochondria are a key step. Video 7, I'll go into detail about how you can optimize mitochondria. So the first thing that happens is luteinizing hormone here. So your brain releases luteinizing hormone, goes into the bloodstreams, makes its way to the testicles. So luteinizing hormone's there knocking on the door, and it's saying to your testicles, make testosterone. So as we just saw, thyroid hormone puts more receptors. You see this here is a receptor. So you got more doors for luteinizing hormone, LH, to go into the testicle fast. So if you get your blood work done and you've got elevated luteinizing hormone, maybe your thyroid's out. It can be a number of things, but normally that's what it is. And the second thing that thyroid hormone does, these enzymes, right? So you've got enzymes everywhere. Enzymes absolutely everywhere to make testosterone in the testosterone pathway. And as we saw right here, T3 increases the mRNA expression of these enzymes. So think about it. You've got LH, you've got more doors for it to come in fast. Beautiful. Then you've got more enzymes in the pathway. So think about it as a factory. If you've got more enzymes, you've got more workers to make more product, testosterone. And, it really is that simple. But thyroid hormone also, what it does is gives you more energy. It boosts testosterone, and it also helps put more transporters for amino acids on the muscle cells. So you're getting protein into the muscle to build muscle faster. So it's certainly doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Based on my blood work, I've got, I'm pretty healthy. I've got great blood panels. My lipids are fine. Homocystine's fine. My liver's fine. My kidney's fine. All of that's fine. And I'm eating to my genetics. So I'm sensitive to oxalates, highly sensitive, a little bit sensitive to lectins. I'm very sensitive to gluten. And the only cheese that I eat is goat's or sheep's cheese. And finally, all food additives and preservatives cause inflammation and cortisol to go up in my body, along with blood glucose. But to add to that, a high fat diet, especially saturated fat, as you see there on the beginning of this, isn't wonderful for me. So that's why keto was a great place to start for me, but it's not where I finished. So putting it all together, this is my food staples. So EOD here means every other day. So I take about 4 liver capsules every other day, and I'll unpack why in a moment. And I have fish with bones every other day, chicken heart twice per week. And the reason I have chicken heart is it's pretty tasty when you know how to cook it right, but it's got a lot of CoQ10 in it, which is great for heart health. And eggs I eat every single day, the egg yolk namely, because it's full of choline. And I'll show you where you can get your choline sources shortly. But as far as everything else goes, I eat meat from lamb, pork, chicken, and beef every day. And genetically, because I don't do too well with these oxalates here, I can't have a lot of leafy greens because they raise my blood sugar. And the only other vegetables that I eat, and the reason I don't eat a lot of vegetables, because again, I have a sensitivity to natural plant insecticides. So I don't do too well with a lot of vegetables. That's just me genetically. That mightn't be you. You might be able to eat a lot of vegetables. That's not me. So the only vegetables I really eat are carrots and green beans. The fats that I get, basically avocado and macadamias, and I eat a little bit of fruit, not too much, pineapple and bananas namely. And the only carbohydrates that I eat are white rice and potatoes. So let's just unpack why I do that. So on screen there, and this comes from there's a link below to go check this out for yourself so you can see where the nutrient dense foods really are. But as you can see on the left of the screen there, liver, spleen, small dried fish, the leafy greens are okay. They don't work for me. And kidney, heart, all of that stuff, very high and bioavailable. The only problems that I've got in my diet that I have to really supplement is the calcium and the folate. As you can see, there's not a lot of folate apart from in the liver. So I've got to supplement folate. And as far as calcium goes, I have the small dried fish, but I also have occasionally, probably 3 times a week, a little bit of goat's cheese. And the reason I don't have a lot of dairy is because it's got a lot of estrogenic compounds in it, as you saw previously. So when it comes to nutrient poor foods, you've got everything there. So, for me, it's not about vegetables versus meat or anything like that. I want to be fucking activated. I want to have high testosterone. I want to be eating the foods that suit my genetics. So everything that I've shown you here today works for me. Now, you could be completely different. You might need more carbohydrates, less carbohydrates. But I'm a 51-year-old man and I maintain that quite effortlessly. So if you want to know more about the way I eat and how I structure my whole day, the previous video towards the end, I unpack that. And so on the next video, we're going to talk about how to optimize your 5 hormonal systems. Then the final video on this series, I'm going to put it all together to show you how to completely optimize testosterone and get you to a place where you're feeling pretty good. You're charging at life because, that's where I am now. I've got a lot of energy. I've got high optimal testosterone and I maintain that physique pretty effortlessly. And I'm not saying that to show you how great I am. I'm just a fucking average dude, right? I'm 51 and I've got to that place. It took a lot of learning. It took a lot of mentors, but you can get there. It's not a cakewalk. It's not going to happen overnight. So let's just summarize everything that we've done here today. I've shown you how testosterone, how you can build muscle. I've shown you how testosterone is, how you can boost it. And the biggest lessons that I learned over the course of, putting this all together was that I was insulin resistant and I had no clue. And I didn't know about my genetics and how high fat and saturated fat weren't great for me. And that a lack of choline can cause a whole bunch of, physiological downfalls that's going to take you out. So the final piece of the puzzle here is where these choline-rich foods are. And I'm just trying to find that slide here. Bear with me. I don't think I've got, there it is. So as you can see there, it's basically in a lot of animal products. You might be thinking, well, why isn't it in vegetables? Well, the reason it's not in a lot of vegetables is because they don't need it. They don't need phosphatidylcholine to export fat out of the liver. They don't need acetylcholine for higher thinking, the central nervous system. They don't need to make bile acids from phosphatidylcholine to digest their fat. They don't need to switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what ACH does here, acetylcholine. And they don't need to make nitric oxide for their blood pressure because they don't have blood pressure. They don't need to make testosterone. And another big reason why choline is super important, especially for the liver, the excretion of drugs and toxins, neutralization of acid, emulsifies the fats that you eat, water, electrolytes, bilirubin, cholesterol, and bile salts. So the plants don't need that shit. So, eat your plants if you like, eat your meat if you, whatever you want to do. But hopefully I've shown you that if we make more intelligent decisions based on our genetic blueprint, that's when we can thrive. That's when we can produce high optimal testosterone. That's when we can have a lot of energy, and that's when we can take off in life. So if you've enjoyed this video, drop a comment in below. And have you got any questions at all about what I'm saying here? Because if you have, I'd love to do a video all about that. So there it is. You've got a lot of power if you know your own individual food staples. And, you fill in the void with supplements, the bare bones, and you know what your genetics are, so you can make more intelligent decisions about what you put in and on your body. I hope you found this helpful.